In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields.
A friend came to see me on one of the evenings of the last week. We were standing at a window of my room in the Foreign Office. It was getting dusk, and the lamps were being lit in the space below on which we were looking. My friend recalls that I remarked on this with the words, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime."
Hello everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, and welcome to my channel. Tonight we're going to revisit The Lamps Are Going Out, World War I by Compass Games. And I'm intending this playthrough to be a single video containing the entire war. And I'm hoping that we are going to create an alternate history of World War I as told through the lens of The Lamps Are Going Out. Now, in order to bring this entire conflict into a single video, I'm going to be abbreviating the gameplay. And what we're going to do is I'll be showing you the actions that I'm proposing, and then I'm going to resolve those actions off camera, and we'll see the results. And I'll make sure I target each theater during each activation, and then we should be able to get a pretty decent alternate history of World War I based on this game. So we're going to begin, and we're going to start with the autumn of 1914 and Germany's turn. Germany begins by drawing East Asia Squadron, 1914 to 1915. We're going to place the East Asia Squadron token near the British Isles. During the Western Allies combat phase, they can remove the East Asia Squadron by spending one British fleet and rolling 3 or higher on a single die. In the event that the squadron survives into the Western Allies production phase, we're going to make a die roll for that squadron, and on the result of 5 or 6, British will lose a production point. We'll place the East Asia Squadron token near the British Isles as a reminder. Germany will conduct its movement phase, and I believe we are going to move 2 armies from the Rhine into Hanover. So we will do that. That's going to form a total of 5 armies in Hanover, and we're hoping to not only capture Belgium, but eventually move into the Somme for a strike against the French capital. Germany also has the opportunity to contest the British blockade in the North Sea. German High Seas Fleet is currently in port. Now, with the appearance of the East Asia Squadron, this could be a good opportunity to challenge them. The problem is, fleets are extremely expensive to replace in this game. It's a big risk. Although this would be the perfect time for the High Seas Fleet to sortie and challenge the Royal Navy, With the appearance of the East Asia Squadron, I'm just reluctant to do that. It has such a damaging effect. If we were to have a disaster in the North Sea and German fleets would be wiped out, we would have a very, very tough time on rebuilding those. So I'm going to wait and see. We're going to begin the combat phase, and we're going to start with guerrilla combat in the East African campaign. Letov Vorbeck is in Tonga, and he is going to attempt some guerrilla tactics against the British East African Army. For this playthrough, the Triple Entente will be rolling the blue dice, and the Central Powers will be rolling the black. As Letov Vorbeck's force is fully supplied, he's going to be hitting on a 5 or 6 with his guerrilla combat. The result is a 6, and we have damaged British East African Army, which is fantastic. So his guerrilla tactics have worked, and we're hoping to drain the British of supplies and resources in this minor theater, resources that could be placed into Western Front or in the Mediterranean theater. On the Western Front, Germany is going to use its 5 armies in Hanover, and they're going to strike into Belgium, hopefully dislodging the BEF and the tiny Belgian army. We have 2 rerolls, courtesy of the Schlieffen plan. Germany's first target will be the fortress at Liège. Historically, these forts slowed the Germans up, but they brought in their heavy Krupp guns, were able to clear them, and proceed on with their von Schlieffen plan. Germany won the Battle of Belgium. They were able to blow through the Belgian forts, and the Second German Army was able to inflict losses on the BEF. However, the German Third Army, under the command of Max von Hausen, ran into a stubborn BEF at the Battle of Mons. They were eventually able to flank the British and push them back into the Somme, but Germany had to expend both of their rerolls from the Schlieffen plan. We move on to the 4th and 5th German armies attacking into the Somme, defended by the fresh French 5th Army. King Albert I of Belgium has been forced into exile, and he has gone to the British Isles. The Battle of the Somme ends in a draw, as both sides are completely exhausted, but the Anglo-British forces hold the field. Germany is stopped short of taking the Somme. On the Eastern Front, the German 8th Army is going to attempt a preemptive strike against the Russian 2nd Army in Brest-Litovsk. German attack from Prussia is repulsed. The 8th Army is spent. In the war at sea, German U-boats have adopted unrestricted submarine warfare in an attempt to damage British shipping. German activity during the period causes no loss in attrition to Germany's submarine force. During the production phase, Germany will have 13 production points, adding 1 extra for their conquest of Belgium. Germany is going to refit their armies in Belgium, in the Rhine, in Posen, and in Prussia. In addition, they're going to refit their U-boats in the unrestricted submarine warfare box, bringing both U-boat fleets to full strength. Germany's also going to construct 2 new armies. They're going to build the 12th Army in the Rhine and the 10th Army in Prussia. Germany will now undertake their technological research. And Germany develops P1, aerial reconnaissance. Germany will place 1 additional air superiority marker in any area containing a land-supplied area containing a German army. As the Western Allies have no air technology, Germany is going to be able to place their air superiority token at will, and they're going to place that in the Rhine. and that will bring Germany's autumn 1914 turn to a close. We'll move to the Western Allies. The Western Allies event is the Old Contemptibles, 1914 to 1915. We're going to place the token on the British First Army, BEF, and we'll allow them a reroll, defensive reroll, of all dice. On the Western Front, the Allies attempt to shore up their position in the Somme by transferring the French 6th and the French 1st Army from Verdun. General Joffre orders the execution of Plan 17, and he orders a strike into Alsace-Lorraine. In the war at sea, the British Admiralty orders the Royal Navy to pursue von Spee's East Asia Squadron. The attack into Alsace-Lorraine is a disaster. The French Second Army takes heavy casualties. In Belgium, French First Army launches a limited offensive. It's able to drive back the German Fifth Army. In the war at sea, British fleet that was dispatched to find and destroy the East Asia Squadron is unsuccessful in its attempt to locate it. And von Spee is currently somewhere in the vast reaches of the Pacific. The blockade remains in effect. German unrestricted submarine warfare is starting to take a toll on British merchant shipping. German U-boats are able to inflict 2 losses on British shipping. On a brighter note, von Spee's East Asia Squadron is unable to do much damage to British shipping. During the Western Allies production phase, France will have 4 production points. Belgian army is going to merge with the French First Army, and that army will be refit. France is going to spend its remaining 4 production points, and they're going to refit their armies in the Somme and in Verdun, bringing all of their forces to full strength. British production is limited to 5 production points due to the losses of the U-boat attacks. Britain is going to raise the British Second Army in the British Isles. In addition, they are going to refit their fleet that is pursuing the East Asia Squadron, refitting the Old Contemptibles, and the British East African Army. The Western Allies will now conduct their technological research. And the Western Allies pull P1, aerial reconnaissance. That will allow them to place 1 additional air superiority marker in any area containing a land-supplied French or British army. The German and Western Allies air forces will now conduct aerial combat. After conducting aerial combat, Royal Air Force and the French Air Force are able to get air superiority over the Somme. The Eastern Allies draw the event card Entente pressures Serbia 1914, a +2 DRM. First attack this turn by a Serbian army against an Austro-Hungarian army. During the Eastern Allies movement phase, the Russians are going to be transferring the 4th Army from Estonia and the 8th Army from Ukraine into Brest-Litovsk. From that location, they are going to launch an attack on German-controlled Prussia. On the Serbian front, the Serbian Second Army is going to launch an attack on the Austro-Hungarian Sixth Army in Bosnia. On the Serbian front, the Serbian First Army launches an attack into Bosnia-Herzegovina. And at the Battle of Mostar, in a sharp battle, Serbs defeat Austrian-Hungarian 6th Army. On the Eastern Front, the Russians throw 4 armies against the Germans, and at the Battle of the Masurian Lakes, although the German armies are spent, they hold the field. In the production phase, the Serbs have promises from the Western Allies to supply them through Greece, although nothing has come as of yet. On the Eastern Front, the Russians have 4 production points. They use 2 of them to repair the 2nd and 5th armies in Brest-Litovsk. And they spend the remaining 2 to raise the Russian 9th Army in the Ukraine. That completes the Eastern Allies' turn for autumn 1914. We move on to the Central Allies. They draw the event Skoda Works, Central Allies 1914 to 1915. As A1 technology is not active, we're going to place 1 Austrian-Hungary heavy artillery in any AH area with an army. The first heavy artillery attack made this turn has an automatic roll of 6. No roll is necessary. The Austrians placed their heavy artillery in Hungary, and to great objections from Germany, they transferred their First Army from Galicia into Hungary, and they're going to attempt a strike at dislodging the Serbians from Serbia. The newly arrived Austro-Hungarian First Army, supported by heavy artillery, is going to launch an attack on the Serbian Second Army in the mountains of Serbia. The remaining Austro-Hungarian forces in Galicia are going to strike at Brest-Litovsk. The Austro-Hungarian attack, provided by the support of the heavy artillery, will produce a result of 6 for them. The first Austro-Hungarian army is attacking the Serbian second. The Serbians are going to be gaining +1 for the mountainous terrain. The Serbs are going to need a roll of 6 to properly defend Serbia from this attack. The result is a 1. The Serbian Second Army is defeated. Austro-Hungarian First is spent along with the artillery. The Austrians are going to pursue the attack. They're going to gain their big push counter. This time it's going to be straight up roll. +1 for the attacking forces, +1 for the defender. And the Austrians, I should say the Serbs, have won that battle 6-2, and Serbia is safe for the moment. The Austro-Hungarian Fifth Army will be spent. The Austrians will launch their attack from the foothills of the Carpathians into Brest-Litovsk. Their initial attack is successful, but the Russian Second Army holds firm, and the Austrian attack is canceled. The Austrians have 3 production points, and they're going to spend those to refit the Austro-Hungarian Second and Third Armies in Galicia and the First Army in Hungary. The Austro-Hungarian heavy artillery is reset. That will bring autumn 1914 to a close. So at the close of the opening salvos of the Great War, autumn 1914 turns to winter 1914. The von Schlieffen Plan has failed in the West. Germany was able to conquer Belgium, but an Anglo-French resistance in the Somme has prevented the Germans from moving into northern France. In the war at sea, Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare campaign against British shipping is highly successful. In addition, Royal Navy has been unable to track down von Spee's East Asia Squadron. On the Serbian front, The Serbs are putting up a valiant defense of their tiny nation. But Austria-Hungary has brought in some heavy artillery, and they're exacting their revenge for the assassination of the Archduke. On the Eastern Front, Russians have attempted to drive the lightly defended German forces from Prussia, but were unsuccessful. And now they're going to be caught into the jaws of very likely a two-pronged attack from Galicia and Prussia in Posen. So we advance to the winter of 1914, and by secret agreement, the Ottoman Empire is going to declare war on Russia and the Western Allies. And this action will open up the Near East Front. And in the winter of 1914, Germany draws the event, the Hindenburg-Ludendorff team, 1914 to 1915. Roll 1 extra combat die for up to 2 German attacks this turn from either Prussia or Posen, but not both. Seeing that the von Schlieffen plan has failed in the West, Germany is going to transfer 2 armies to the Eastern Front. The 12th and 1st German armies are moved by rail to Posen, where they're going to launch an attack into Poland, which is garrisoned by only light forces. And they can plan on continuing their assault into Brest-Litovsk. And seeing the opportunity that was given to them by von Spee's escape from Tsingtao, the German High Seas Fleet will sortie and attempt to break the blockade in the North Sea. The German High Seas Fleet manages to catch Royal Navy off the Danish coast. The Battle of Jutland will begin. British Royal Navy manages to damage one of the German fleets. But superior German gunnery fire damages 2 British fleets. The battle is a draw. And as the British fleet has the tactical advantage, the High Seas Fleet will return to its ports in Wilhelmshaven. In German East Africa, Ludov Vorbeck continues with his guerrilla campaign against the British East African Army. But in this season, his efforts are ineffective. Germany begins with a limited offensive on the Western Front, attacking from Belgium into the Somme. Western Allies have air superiority over the battlefield. On the Western Front, Germany throws 4 armies against the British forces defending at Ypres. And once again, the slaughter of the innocents occurs. British Expeditionary Force holds their ground, inflicting heavy casualties on the German army. In the east, the newly formed Hindenburg and Ludendorff team order an attack from Posen into lightly defended Poland. And in a stunning success, Germany manages to occupy Poland with the help of the leadership of Hindenburg and Ludendorff. German armies press forward into Brest-Litovsk, dislodging the Russian defenders. In the U-boat campaign in the North Atlantic, German unrestricted submarine warfare is starting to have an attrition on their submarine forces. During Germany's production phase, they have 12 production points. They're going to use those production points to refit their armies in Belgium, Brest-Litovsk, Prussia, and they will also refit the damage to the German High Seas Fleet. And with the remaining 2 production points, Germany is going to construct the 11th Army in the Rhine. German technological research produces A1 heavy artillery. Germany places 2 heavy artillery units, and Austria-Hungary places 1 in any land-supplied area containing at least 1 army of the same faction. Germany elects to place heavy artillery in Belgium. They also place heavy artillery in Brest-Litovsk. And the Austrians place heavy artillery in Galicia. That brings a very successful winter campaign from Germany to a close. Germany wins air superiority once again over the Rhine. The development of German heavy artillery will allow them to roll 2 dice when attacking. The Western Allies draw the event card First Line Formations. Place on a Western Allies army DRM +2 in any combat. The French elect to place First Line Formations in the French First Army. Once again, the Royal Navy dispatches forces to pursue von Spey's East Asia Squadron. The Royal Navy is reeling from a thrashing in the North Sea in the Battle of Jutland. On the Western Front, the French transfer 2 armies from Verdun into the Somme and begin a push to retake Belgium. In German East Africa, Jan Christian Smuts and his British East African force attempt to hunt down Letov Vorbeck in Tonga. And their efforts are successful. Letov Vorbeck is brought into battle, and both sides suffer heavy losses. In northern France, the French launched their offensive into Belgium. After heavy fighting up and down the front lines, the French are exhausted, but they do manage to spend 3 German armies in Belgium. That will minimize the Germans' ability to counterattack into the Somme in the next season. In the war in the North Atlantic, German U-boats are able to damage British shipping, but not to the extent that they did in fall 1914. During the French production phase, they have 4 production. France will refit 2 armies in the Somme and will construct the new 7th Army in Verdun. In the South Atlantic, the Royal Navy attempts to hunt down von Spey's East Asia Squadron. This time, the wily German commander is caught near the Falkland Islands and his battle force is destroyed. Great Britain has 6 production points. They end up refitting the BEF in the Somme. The British East African force is also resupplied. With 4 production points remaining, British refit the Royal Navy, bring it back to fighting trim. 1 production point is transferred to France. This brings the offensive operations in the West to a close. The Western Allies attempt to develop anti-submarine warfare technology, but their efforts are unsuccessful. The Eastern Allies draw the event card First Line Formations. Place on an Eastern Allies army, DRM +2 in any combat. The Russians elect to place their first line formations in the Third Army in the Ukraine. Russians decide to transfer the First Army from Lithuania to Ukraine. And the spent 8th Russian Army is moved from Ukraine to Lithuania. The Russians in Ukraine launch a counterattack the German forces in Brest-Litovsk. So the Russian counterattack in Brest-Litovsk begins. The Russian counterattack into Brest-Litovsk is very successful, but unfortunately they're unable to move the Germans out. Germany holds the province. With only 4 production points, the Russians would like to send supplies through neutral Romania to Serbia, but they don't have enough production to do so. They're going to use their 4 production points to refit 4 Russian armies. And the Eastern Allies' turn comes to a close. And with the start of the Central Allies' turn, the Ottomans declare war on Russia and the West. And with that, the Near East front opens. We have the Ottoman First Army in Gallipoli, Second Spent Army in Anatolia, Spent Third Army in Erzurum, and Fourth Spent Army in Damascus. The Russians have their Spent Caucasus Army in Kars, and the British have the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force spent in Sinai, and a full-strength Indian Expeditionary Force in Basra. The Central Allies draw the event card First Line Formations, 1914 to 1915. Place on a Central Allies Army, DRM +2 in any combat. The Austrians place their first line formations in the 1st Austro-Hungarian Army in Hungary. Austrians will be attacking Serbia in an attempt to drive them out and knock Serbia out of the war. In Galicia, supported with heavy artillery, the Austrians will launch an attack into Ukraine. With the onset of the Near East campaign's opening, Turkey moves their 4th Army into Jerusalem and their 2nd Army into Baghdad. Supported by heavy artillery and the first-line formations of the First Army, the Austrians take their final revenge for the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and Serbia is knocked out of the war. The surviving elements of the First Serbian Army retreat into Albania. King Peter I is exiled to the island of Corfu. Although supported by Austrian heavy artillery, the offensive into Ukraine is stopped by the Russian 9th Army. Ottoman production is 1 point. They use that to refresh their army in Jerusalem, pressuring the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in Sinai. The Austrians use their 3 points of production to refresh their armies in Galicia, along with refreshing their First Army in Serbia. The Austrian heavy guns are reset and are ready for action. And this brings the winter of 1914 to a close. The spring of 1915, and the Germans draw the event Elite Mountain Division, 1915 plus. Place on a German or Austro-Hungarian army. Cancel the Mountain DRM modifier for the remainder of the game. The Austrian 10th Army in Austria receives the Elite Mountain Division. In spring 1915, Germany plans a limited offensive in Belgium into the Somme and a limited offensive into Lithuania. from Prussia. They're going to relocate their heavy artillery from Brest-Litovsk into Prussia. The Germans will transfer the 7th Army from the Rhine into Belgium. In German East Africa, Letov Vorbeck, now spent, is unable to make any progress with his guerrilla attacks against the British East African force. Although the German spring offensive is supported with heavy artillery, Allied air superiority over the Somme is the difference, and the offensive makes no ground. The German offensive into Lithuania is initially successful, while supported with heavy artillery, but the German 8th Army is unable to push the Russians out of the Baltics. In the submarine campaign, German U-boats suffer no attrition in the North Atlantic. Germany, with 12 production points, decides to refit their armies in Belgium. In addition, they refit 5 armies in Prussia and Brest-Litovsk. They spend 1 point to refresh one of their U-boats in the unrestricted warfare box, and they spend their final point to send aid to the Austrians. German Technological Research develops U-1 commerce rating. The Western Allies draw the event card Salonika. Place in Greece on the Salonika open side. Western Allies may move 1 army into Greece. If moved this turn, place a trench in Greece at no cost. Once a Western army enters Greece, Greece is considered a Triple Entente ally for production point transfers and retreat purposes only. Well, the Salonika event comes too late to significantly help Serbia. So the Western Allies open a new front through diplomatic means in the southern Balkans. In German East Africa, Jan Christian Smuts and his British East African Army launch an attack on Letov Vorbeck in Tonga. And the attack is successful, forcing Letov Vorbeck to retreat into the hinterlands of German East Africa. Taking advantage of the diplomatic efforts in Greece, Britain moves their 2nd Army and entrenches in Greece. With the Germans losing control of the airspace over the Rhine, France will launch attacks into the Rhine and into Belgium. The offensive into Alsace-Lorraine is unproductive, while the attack into Belgium causes heavy casualties to the Germans. Once again, in the war at sea, German U-boats are extremely successful and have inflicted 2 points of damage on the British economy. France uses its production along with the British transfer to refit their armies on the Western Front. The British economy has been reduced to 5 production due to U-boat activity in the North Atlantic. Britain will use their production to repair the British BEF in the Somme, British East African Force, and the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in Sinai. Britain decides to construct their 3rd Army in the British Isles. Following dogfights over the Somme, Western Allies lose air superiority over the Somme battlefield. The Western Allies attempt to develop planned barrages but are unsuccessful in their research efforts. The Eastern Allies draw the event Scorched Earth. Place on this card Russian armies may now opt to legally retreat all armies in an area in lieu of making a unit spent after a combat loss. The attacker is spent and advances into the area which the Russians just abandoned without making a garrison die roll. The Russians opt to move their spent First Army into the Pripyat marshes. Russian attacks on the Eastern Front are temporarily halted as Russians attempt to resupply their armies. Russians use their 4 production points to refresh their armies along the Eastern Front. The Central Allies draw the event, Rasputsa. It's going to turn Russian battlefields to mud during spring and fall turns. This is a spring turn, so if there were any artillery units, either German or Austrian units in Russia, those units would be flipped from ready to spent. The Austrians will relocate their heavy artillery from Hungary into Galicia. The 3 Austrian armies in Galicia will launch an attack into Ukraine. In the Near East, the Ottomans will remain quiet until a proper supply line through Bulgaria will allow them to expand their armies with the help of German supplies. The Austrian attack is successful, but the Russians employ their scorched earth policy. They pull back from the Ukraine into Kiev without sustaining losses. The entire Austrian force moves into Ukraine and must halt its advance. The Turks decide to use their production to reinforce their position in Erzurum, refreshing the Ottoman Third Army. The Austrians, with their 3 points of supply and their 1 transfer from Germany, elect to refresh their armies in Ukraine and in Austria, along with the Austrian Sixth Army in Bosnia. That brings the Central Powers' allies' turn to a close, and we enter summer 1915. Summer 1915, Germany draws the event card Inspired Leadership. Place 1 on 3 different German armies. Reroll all combat dice once if result was a loss, and rerolling could change the outcome to a win. Marker remains in play if the dice are not rerolled, or the reroll wins the combat by a +3 differential. Germany elects to place their Inspired Leadership in Belgium, the Rhine, and in Brest-Litovsk. Germany elects to relocate their heavy artillery from Prussia into Brest-Litovsk. In the west, Germany will launch attacks into the Somme, and in the east, from Brest-Litovsk, Germany will attack Minsk, and from Prussia, they will launch an offensive into Lithuania. In German East Africa, Ledov Vorbeck is successful. He launches a counterattack into Tonga. The offensive into the Somme begins. With the help of German-inspired leadership combined with heavy artillery, Germans are able to put the BEF and the 6th French Army out of action, but are unable to make any sustained effort into the Somme. Germany manages to drive the Russian armies from Lithuania. They capture Riga. In an offensive from Brest-Litovsk, they manage to inflict damage to Russian armies in Minsk, but are unable to follow it up with an advance. German unrestricted submarine warfare in the North Atlantic continues to move forward, no attrition to German U-boat forces. Germany, with its 12 production points, refits its armies in Belgium. They also refit their armies in Brest-Litovsk and Lithuania. With 2 production left, Germany constructs the 17th Army in the Rhine. In the technological advancement phase, Germany develops U-2 fire control technology. Card effects listed on the U-boat attack tables. Each German fleet may make 1 reroll of their naval combat attack dice, improving German gunnery fire. In the air war over the Western Front, Germany is unable to achieve air superiority in any of the sectors. The Western Allies draw the event USA Vested Interests. USA entry marker +1. During the Western Allies production phase, production modifier step, Great Britain will achieve +1 production point. The US entry marker rises by 1. Britain decides to move its newly created Third Army by sea movement to the Somme. French move their Second Army from Verdun into the Somme. Western Allies will declare a summer offensive into Belgium. With the newfound support of the United States, Britain decides to order an offensive into Jerusalem from the Sinai. The British attack is successful, but they're unable to take advantage of their initiative. The Anglo-British attack into the Somme is partially successful, although heavy casualties are sustained on both sides. Germany still holds the field. Once again, in the North Atlantic, German U-boat campaign of unrestricted submarine warfare wreaks havoc to the British economy. During the French production phase, France decides to refit 2 armies in the Somme and construct a new army in Verdun. Britain, with 5 production, refits their armies in the Somme and in German East Africa. They elect to refit the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in the Sinai, continuing to pressure the Ottomans, and they do a 1-point transfer to France. The Western Allies attempt to develop planned barrages, but once again they are unsuccessful. In the air war, Western Allies are able to wrest air superiority over the Somme. The Eastern Allies draw the event card Central War Industries. During the Eastern Allies combat phase, their units will experience a -1 DRM for the first attack this turn by a Russian army. During the Eastern Allies production phase, Petrograd's production points are increased from 1 to 2 for the remainder of the game. Production in Petrograd is permanently increased to 2 points. The Russians decide once again to take no offensive action, and they use their 5 production points now to refit their armies. Russian armies along the Eastern Front are refit, along with the Caucasus Army in Kars. The Central Allies draw the event card Balkan War Veterans, which will have no effect. The Austrians decide to move their 5th Army, which is spent in Hungary, to Serbia to meet the new threat in Greece. The Austrian forces in Ukraine launch an offensive into the Pripyat marshes. The Russians elect to use the scorched earth policy, moving their 1st Army out of the Pripyat marshes into Smolensk. And the Austrian 4th Army is spent, and it enters the Pripyat marshes and ceases its movement. The Austrians elect to attack into Kiev, but the offensive is stalled and canceled. In the Near East, the Ottomans elect to stand pat. They will use their 1 production point to refresh their army in Jerusalem. The Austrians, with 3 production, will refresh the 4th Army in the Pripyat Marshes, the 2nd Army in Ukraine, and the 5th Army in Serbia. And with that action, summer of 1915 comes to a close. We'll move on to fall 1915. The fall of 1915, Germany draws the card, Bled White. Choose a German-controlled area with at least 1 army. The 1st French Army defeated this turn by a German attack located in the selected area with a 3+ differential is removed from the map and returned to the force pool. With that event, Germany elects to choose the province of Verdun. During its movement phase, Germany will relocate the 4th Army from Belgium and the German heavy artillery to the Rhine. They'll be making a push into Verdun. In the east, Germany plans an offensive into the Minsk area, beginning with the forces in Brest-Litovsk, and if necessary, a flanking maneuver from the forces in Lithuania. The German attempt to bleed the French white is a disaster. They managed to breach the French trenches, but they could move no further, and all 4 German armies are spent. In German East Africa, Letov Vorbeck again is successful. His guerrilla tactics spend the British East African Army in Tonga. In the east, the German juggernaut continues as they take control of Minsk and inflict heavy casualties on the Russian army in Estonia. In the North Sea and North Atlantic, German unrestricted submarine warfare causes no attrition to the U-boat forces. During their production phase, Germany has 12 production points, and they decide to refit all of their armies on the Western Front. And in the east, Germany refits 4 armies in Minsk and Lithuania. During their technological advancement phase, Germany develops A2 technology, planned barrages. Germany places 1 additional heavy artillery unit in any land-supplied area containing at least 1 German army. Allow us to roll 3 dice when attacking if an air superiority marker is ready or flown is present with the firing artillery. Germany elects to place the heavy artillery in Belgium. And finally, Germany wrests control of the skies over Belgium, gaining air superiority. The Western Allies draw the card, Gallipoli invasion demanded. The government wants results and mandates an invasion of Gallipoli under certain conditions. See Event 103 description for details. Draw 1 more event. The additional event is Treaty of London. Italy is neutral. Italy declares war and joins the Triple Entente. See Rulebook 13.0 Force Pool Summary. Italy receives 1 extra production point during this production phase. The Italians enter the fray. They have their 1st and 2nd armies in northern Italy, and they are spent. Great Britain moves its 2nd Army from the Somme and invades Gallipoli. The Italians move their 1st Army into the mountains in Venetia. With the invasion of Gallipoli underway, Western Allies decide to stand pat on the Western Front. Britain elects to bring naval gunfire support into the invasion area on Gallipoli. The Commonwealth amphibious assault on Gallipoli goes poorly. British 3rd Army is spent. The Turks remain fresh above the hills of Gallipoli. However, a beachhead is established. In the Near East, the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force is going to march on Jerusalem. And here's the British attack. And the Ottomans end up winning that battle 3-1, so that will expend the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force. And from Basra, the Indian Expeditionary Force is going to march towards Baghdad and attack the spent Turkish Second Army. The spent Turkish force provides an adequate defense for Baghdad, and the Indian Expeditionary Force is spent and it moves back to Basra. In the war at sea, German U-boats once again are very successful, inflicting 2 production point loss on British economy. In the production phase, Italy, which has just joined the conflict, has 2 production points this turn, one for their normal and one due to the play of that event card. They're going to use both of those points to refresh their armies in Venetia and North Italy. The French have 5 production points this turn, courtesy of Britain giving them a production point transfer. They're going to use those points to refresh their armies on the Western Front. The French have 1 production point left, and they're going to transfer that to Italy. Britain has a total of 6 production points this season, although they lost 2 for the U-boat attacks. They're going to use those production points to refresh their fleet in the blockade box, refresh the British East African Army, the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, and the Indian Expeditionary Force in Basra. And with their 2 remaining production points, they're going to build the spent 4th British Army in the British Isles, and they're going to refit their 3rd Army on the beaches of Gallipoli. The Western Allies attempt to produce P-3 technology Royal Air Force created. Unfortunately, they only have P-1 technology, and the Germans have P-1 technology. So that'll be shuffled back into the deck. The Western Allies and Germany will conduct dogfights over the Western Front. And the Western Allies will be able to place their superiority marker, and they're going to place that over the Somme. The Eastern Allies draw the event card, Tsar Takes Command. The first 2 Russian attacks this turn suffer a -1 attack penalty. If Brusilov is in effect this turn, there is no penalty. Draw 1 more event. The next event is Lusitania sunk. Flip the USA track marker to the Lusitania sunk side. If there are U-boats in the unrestricted box, USA entry track +2, and there is. The USA entry mark is flipped to the Lusitania sunk side. USA entry rises by 2 up to 3. Russians will take no movements, but they're going to attempt to reclaim the Pripyat marshes from the 4th Austrian Army. We'll start with an attack from Kiev. Now this is going to have a -1 attack penalty for the first 2 attacks due to the Tsar taking command. Russian attacks were a complete disaster, and it had spent 3 Russian armies, and the Austrians are undamaged in the Pripyat marshes. With the industrial increase in Petrograd, Russians have 5 production points, and they're going to use those to refresh their armies on the Eastern Front. They've refreshed 4 armies, and they have constructed the spent 10th Russian Army in Smolensk. The Central Allies draw the event card Austro-Hungarian Fleet. Place near Rome. Remove one production point being transferred to Italy, if any. Western Allies may not make sea moves through the Mediterranean. During the Western Allies combat phase, remove the Austro-Hungarian fleet by spending one British fleet. So, with the appearance of the Austro-Hungarian fleet, the 1 point transfer to Italy is going to be removed. No movements will be made during the turn. The Turkish First Army is going to counterattack the British Third on the beaches of Gallipoli. The British forces stand firm and the Ottoman First Army is spent. The Austrians are going to launch an attack into Kiev, supported by their heavy artillery. The Austrian attack is stymied by the 9th Russian Army in Kiev. Although the forces are spent, the Russians hold the ground. During the production phase, Turkey is going to refresh their First Army in Gallipoli. The Austrians will spend one of their 3 production points to refresh the Second Army in Ukraine. The remaining 2 points will be used to construct trenches in Ukraine. That will bring the Central Allies' turn to a close, and we'll move on to the winter of 1915. In the winter of 1915, Germany draws the card Fokker Scourge. Immediately advance 1 level in Tech Group P. That will allow Germany to develop P2 technology, synchronized machine guns. Germany places 1 additional air superiority marker in any area containing a land-supplied German army. Roll 2 dice in dogfights during the regroup phase. Defender wins 1 tie in combat. As this is a winter turn, Germany will hold its position in the east. On the Western Front, Germany is transferring 2 armies from the Rhine to Belgium. In German East Africa, Letta Vorbeck is hoping for resupply in 2016, and he's going to still continue with his guerrilla attacks, this time attacking the British East African force in Tonga. This time his attack is unsuccessful. As the Germans will be quiet in the east, they're going to be launching attacks from the Rhine into Verdun and into the Somme from Belgium. At Verdun, the Germans are partially successful. They're able to breach the trenches and inflict damage on the French 10th. The attack on the Somme manages to spend the British BEF and 2 French armies, and unfortunately all of the German armies are spent now. In the war at sea, Germany experiences no attrition to their U-boat force. During the production phase, Germany has 12 production points. They're going to refit all of their armies on the Western Front. They'll spend 1 point to refresh the German 9th Army in Minsk. Germany spends 1 production point to produce the spent German 18th Army in the Rhine. And finally, Germany is going to transfer 2 points to Turkey, of which 1 is going to be consumed going through neutral Bulgaria. The Turks will receive 1 production point. During the German technological advances phase, Germany develops C1 counter battery fire. Germany and Austria place 1 heavy artillery unit that can trace supply by land to a home area. Roll 2 dice when attacking or defending. As the Austrians already have both of their heavy artillery units deployed, they won't receive any additional artillery. Germany elects to place their new heavy artillery unit in Lithuania. As Germany has P2 technology and the Fokker Scourge card, they're able to place both of their air superiority markers on the board. They'll leave one in Belgium and the other will appear over the Rhine. German heavy artillery is reset, and now with the appearance of C1 technology, both the Austrians and Germany may now use their artillery defensively. The Western Allies draw the event card Pantaloons Rouge. The card only applies to 1914, so the card is discarded. During the Western Allies movement phase, Royal Navy moves in to challenge the Austro-Hungarian fleet and eliminate it from the board. Smuts and his East African force in Tonga attack Lettow-Vorbeck. The attack is successful. Lettow-Vorbeck is sent in retreat into Portuguese East Africa. On the Western Front, Western Allies decide to counterattack into Belgium. With defensive artillery fire and air superiority over the Somme, Western Allies' attack into Belgium is completely stymied. Heavy casualties for the French armies. At Gallipoli, the British Third Army attempts to launch a frontal assault against the Ottoman First Army. Once again, the British are met with stiff Turkish resistance. From Sinai, Allenby and the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force make another attempt against Jerusalem. And once again, they are repulsed by the 4th Turkish Army. And finally, from Basra, the Indian Expeditionary Force attempts to move in and drive the Turks out of Baghdad. And this time, the Indian forces are successful, and the Turkish Second Army retreats to Mosul. And the Indian Expeditionary Force takes Baghdad. Once again, German submarines take their toll on British shipping, inflicting 2 additional losses to British production. Switching to the production phase, Italy has 1 production point, and they're going to raise the 5th Italian Army in Venetia. That will arrive in a spent condition. The French, with 4 production points, will refit as many of their armies in the Somme and at Verdun as possible. The British, with 5 production points, are going to refit their damaged fleet in the blockade box. They're also going to refit the BEF in the Somme and the British East African force, now occupying the interior portions of German East Africa. And with their final 2 production points, they're going to refit the British Third Army on the beaches of Gallipoli and the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in Sinai. The Western Allies attempt to develop A3 technology tanks, but they're unable to make the development. The opponent does not have A3, which will not allow them 1 level in A-Tech. They get nothing. Finally, the Western Allies and the Germans will fight for aerial control over the Western Front. Germany has level 2 technology, giving them 2 dice. Western Allies have 1. In this case, the Western Allies have 1 control over the skies, and in this case, they're going to place that control over the Somme. The Eastern Allies draw the card, the Russian Steamroller, 1914 to 1915. Eastern Allies production phase, raise new units. Step, place a spent Russian army in the Petrograd and Moscow areas at no cost. Russians are nearly a spent force. They're going to launch periodic offensives into the Pripyat marshes, Minsk, and Lithuania. Germany employed its heavy artillery defensively. The attack in Lithuania was partially successful. And the attack in Minsk was completely unsuccessful. Russian attack from Smolensk to the Pripyat marshes spent the Austro-Hungarian Fourth Army. During the Russian production phase, the spent 12th Russian Army arrives in Petrograd, and the spent 6th Russian Army arrives in Moscow as a part of the Russian steamroller event. Russia now has 5 production points, and they'll use those to refresh their armies on the Eastern Front. Russian armies have been refit. The Central Powers draw the card Bulgaria joins Central Powers. Bulgaria declares war and joins the Central Powers. So the Bulgarians have signed on with the Central Powers, and the 1st and 2nd Bulgarian armies appear in Bulgaria. For movements, the 2nd Bulgarian is going to reinforce the Turks in Gallipoli. And the Austro-Hungarian 6th Army will move from Bosnia to Serbia. In Gallipoli, newly arrived Bulgarian 2nd Army is going to attack the British 3rd. The attack by the Bulgarians is a success, and they're going to follow that up with an attack by the 1st Turkish Army, trying to drive the British off the beachhead. The attack is successful. The British 3rd Army is going to be removed from the board, and it will use sea movement to place it back into the force pool. And the beachhead at Gallipoli is no more. The Austrians are thinking about a strike into Greece, but they're going to wait until they can relocate some of their heavy artillery. In the meantime, we'll move to the Ukraine. The Austrians, supported by their heavy artillery, will launch an offensive into Kiev. The limited offensive is successful, and the Russian 9th is spent. During the Turkish production phase, they have 2 production, courtesy of the transfer from Germany. They're going to use those points to refit the Turkish 2nd Army in Mosul. In addition, they will refit their 1st Army in Gallipoli. Bulgaria has no production. We'll move to the Austro-Hungarians, and they're going to use their 3 points to refresh their armies on the Eastern Front. And with that, we bring a close to 1915, and we'll move to the spring of 1916. As we begin 1916, we've got deadlock on the Western Front. In the east, Germans have managed to push the Russians back to nearly to within their capital. The Balkans, the Austrians, now joined by the Bulgarians, have managed to knock Serbia out of the war, and they're waiting on the doorstep of Greece. In the German East African campaign, Ledov Vorbeck is badly in need of resupply. In the Near East, the British have made some gains, taking Baghdad. Their failed attack into Gallipoli was repulsed with the help of the Bulgarians. From the technological level, Germany has managed to acquire C1, A2, P2, U2 technologies. Western allies have been stymied. They only have P1 technology at present. And currently, the USA entry track sits at 3. The Lusitania incident has occurred. begin 1916, Germany draws the card Flamethrowers, 1915 plus. Keep this card for use in the attack phase. May be deployed in trench attacks. See Event 101 description for details. Draw one more event. Germany draws the card U-Boot Deutschland, 1916 plus. If the United States has not declared war, receive bonus production point this turn. See Event 102 description for details. Draw one more event. So we've marked Germany with a production point bonus, and we'll draw another card. Germany draws the card Phosgene gas used, 1916 plus. CP-G1 technology not active. Take the G1 from the technology deck. Available for use this turn. Germany develops poison gas. DRM +1 to the first attack from an area with a German army that can trace supply by land to German home area. Discard to the technology deck during the production phase after researching technology. All right, we'll move on to the German movement phase, and Germany has, I think, an opportunity here. In addition to poison gas, which we have just developed, we also have flamethrowers, and that will be useful against trenches. So that would definitely institute an attack into Verdun area. But in addition to that, Germany also has U-2 technology fire control. Each German fleet may make one roll of their naval combat attack dice. So it's a reroll. So I think this is a very good opportunity for Germany to make some ground up here before the Allies can develop technologies. And I have a hunch that the Allied technologies will be coming forthwith. The fact is they have only developed to this point P1 aerial reconnaissance. It's very unusual because with the cards, you're able to obtain the technology of the other player if he has advanced. Like as an example, if the opponent has P2, you can advance to level 1 in a P-Tech. So it's very unusual that this has gone this long and the Allies, in this case, only have one technological development. So I have a hunch those are going to be coming quite quick. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to be launching attacks since we have flamethrowers into Verdun. I'm going to use poison gas in the Somme. And then we have our attacks that we can make in the east. And Russia is basically just hanging on by a thread at this point. So we have a good chance on being able to knock them out, I think. And we'd be able to pick up quite a few victory points that way. The one thing that I am concerned about is the intervention of Romania. We don't know when they're going to be coming in. If they come in, right now, Austria-Hungary has no defense in Galicia or Hungary, so I have to concern myself with that. And they are going to be acting first, so I have to decide if I'm going to use any of my movements to transfer German forces into Hungary or Galicia. The problem is if I do that, I guess I could transfer it from the Eastern Front. I don't want to weaken any of these two because we're trying to make some headway here. And one army can make a big difference in being able to push out the opponents or not. So if I am going to make a movement, it's probably going to be from my German armies that are located in Minsk. And I think as a precaution, I'm going to do that. I'm going to move the 1st German Army from Minsk, and we're going to transport that to Galicia. And I'm going to do that because that is a mountain area. I don't want the Romanians in there necessarily. So we'll do that. Next, we have to decide on if we want to do any type of other movements from the east to west. I don't think I will. So that'll be the extent of the German ground movement. German High Seas Fleet is going to sortie, and we're going to challenge the British in the blockade box. All right, we're going to resolve the naval combat. The British have 3 full fleets. Germany has 2, so they'll be rolling 3 dice. We'll get 2, but we get a reroll. Ones and twos are hits. Here's the roll. Wow, okay. Well, at this point, England has done 2 hits. We have 1 hit. All right, so we can do a re-roll of the dice, and we will do so. Here's our re-roll. We've got a 2. Germany has done 3 hits. The British have done 2. All right, so we'll count that up. So the German High Seas Fleet has done 3 hits. Britain has done 2. So at this point, each side, nobody has anything other than spent fleets, but because Britain was in the box, they will retain possession, and the German fleets will have to go back to their port. Very heavy damage. Next, we're going to be launching attacks into Verdun. I have a total of 2 unspent armies in there. We have air superiority, we have German heavy artillery, and we have flamethrowers. So we'll be employing those on the trenches. Now Germany, since they have air superiority and they have the German heavy artillery with planned barrages technology, it's going to allow them to roll 3 dice when attacking, since they have air superiority. And incidentally, those flamethrowers are going to give us a +2 to our attack against the trenches. All right, the German attack into Verdun was partially successful. I ended up burning my German-inspired leadership counter, and that still didn't help. So we were able to breach them and did damage to the French 10th, but that's as far as we got. We're going to switch now to the Somme, and we're going to employ our poison gas. All right, the attack on the Somme was very successful. Western Allies' air superiority kicked in the last battle, and that saved the 4th French Army from being spent. So we've exhausted all of our forces in Belgium, but we made a lot of damage to the preparedness of the Western Allies. We'll switch to the east. All right, this is a spring turn, so we don't have to worry about the Russian winters. Incidentally, Russian winters, anybody except Russia during a winter turn with battle taking place in one of those snow areas, you don't ever achieve the big push counter. That's the penalty. I'm going to begin with an attack from Lithuania into Estonia. Then we're going to have the forces in Minsk attack Russia. And I think that'll be all the attacks. Well, the German attack in Estonia failed, but the attack in Russia was very successful, and we were able to spend those forces, but unfortunately I was not able to push them back. If we would have had our heavy artillery available for offensive operations, that would have been a big difference, but we didn't have it. So that is the extent of the German attacks. We'll move on to our production phase. Britain is still clinging to possession of the blockade box. So we're going to make our rolls for our unrestricted submarine warfare and see if we're going to take any attrition. And we've gotten lucky with our rolls. There's no attrition to the German submarine forces. All right, Germany is going to have a total of 12 production points, and they're going to gain an extra one for the Deutschland. So they have a total of 13 production points, and we're going to refit all of our armies on the Western Front to begin with. All right, that costed a total of 9 production points. We're also going to spend 1 more to refit one of our fleets. As long as we have a fresh fleet available, that prohibits the British from trying any amphibious operations in Belgium. So it's always important to keep those fit, at least one of them. All right, we've got 3 production points left, and we're going to refit 1, 2, and 3 armies, along with all of our artillery units on the board, and that's going to complete our production phase. All right, during Germany's technological research phase, they developed P3 technology, Jägerstaffels formed. Germany places one additional air superiority marker in any area containing a land-supplied German army. They'll be rolling 3 dice for dogfights now. All right, Germany is going to be rolling 3 dice for their dogfights, 1 for the Allies, and the highest die that Germany has will be compared with the Allied die, and that'll be the number of air formations they can place on the board. Here's the roll. Okay, Germany rolled a 6. The Allies have a 3, so they'll be able to place all 3 of their air formations, their air superiority markers, on the board. Germany's going to keep 1 air superiority marker in Belgium, 1 in the Rhine. They'll also place 1 on the Eastern Front in Minsk. The Western Allies draw the event Inspired Leadership 1915 plus. Place 1 on a Western Allies army. That allows them the rerolls if it can change the result. And they're going to place that on the French 4th Army in the Somme. The card also says place the card in next year's deck. Okay, we move on to Western Allies movement. And I think they're going to be trying to put some pressure on the Austrians. They're going to move the 2nd Italian into Venetia. And I think that is going to be the limits of Western Allied movement. I believe so. And I think the only attacks that we're going to be able to afford to make will be in the Italian front, and they're going to try to dislodge the Austro-Hungarian forces up in the mountains in Austria. The Italian attack into Austria was quite severe. The Austrians elected to sacrifice their 10th Army in lieu of having to retreat. So they've kept possession of the mountains in Austria, but cost them 1 army in the process. Not good. Next, we're going to resolve our U-boat attacks in the North Atlantic. And once again, German submarines are wreaking havoc with the British economy. -2 to production. We'll go to the production phase for Italy. In Italian East Africa, British are going to try to launch another attack against Ludov Vorbeck. He is in Portuguese Africa right now. The attack is successful, and Ludov Vorbeck has been pushed into Rhodesia. If he doesn't get resupplied soon, there will be a problem. Italy has 1 production point, and they're going to refit their 1st Army. The French have 4 production points. They're going to refit 1 army in Verdun and 3 armies in the Somme. Britain has a total of 7 production points. They're going to lose 2 because of the U-boat attacks, and they're down to 5 production points. And this is going to be a tough year or season for Britain. They have to spend 2 to refit at least 2 of the fleets in the blockade box. So they will do that. That leaves them with 3 production. They're going to have to refit the British 1st in the Somme. And they'll have to spend 1 to refit British forces in East Africa. That leaves them with 1 production point. And with that 1 point, I think they're going to do a transfer to France. That's going to complete their production phase. Western Allies research produces poison gas. It's going to give them a +1 DRM to the first attack from an area with a Western Allied army. And incidentally, the German poison gas was put back into the technology deck. As soon as you use the card, you discard it to the deck during the production phase after researching technology. Now the Western Allies will take care of their dogfights. They are only going to get 1 die. Germans get 3. And Germany has won 6-3, so there'll be no air superiority for the Western Allies. And the Eastern Allies draw the card National Defense Act 1916 plus. Winter 1916 game turn or any other game turn. In this case, it is not a winter turn. So the USA entry track is going to move up 2. That's going to move the USA entry marker up to 5. When it gets to 8, the doughboys are coming into the conflict. Okay, we'll move to the Eastern Allies movement phase. And I think what they're going to do is they will move the 12th spent Russian army into Russia and the 6th spent Russian army into Smolensk. That'll be their 2 moves. Most of the Russian armies are spent. The only thing the Russians could try to do is to attack from the 2 adjoining areas into the Pripyat marshes that's defended by a single Austro-Hungarian army. And I think they will do that. The 2 Russian attacks into the Pripyat spent the Austro-Hungarian 4th Army, but the Russian armies are now completely spent, and they need to do a lot of refits. The Russians have a total of 5 production with the increased production in Petrograd, and they're going to have to use those to refit the armies. And we're going to start by refitting at least 1 into each of the surrounding provinces, and then whatever's left over, we'll try to refit the armies in that area. So the Russian production was able to refit 2 armies in Kiev, 2 in Smolensk, 1 in Russia. And the Central Allies draw the card von der Goltz, 1916 plus. Place on a Turkish army. Roll 2 extra attack dice. And our choices would be to place it on the 3rd Army in Erzurum and then launch an attack into the mountainous area of Kars, or in Mosul and attack Baghdad and drive the British Indian Army back. On the Baghdad track, it takes 2 points to refresh an army that is not a Turkish army on that track if you're not on Basra. So it's expensive for the British to do that. But I think this is a golden opportunity to attack the Russians in Kars, and I'm going to place von der Goltz with the Erzurum army. The Austrians are going to move an army from Serbia into Hungary to make sure that we watch Romania carefully. They're also going to move the 5th Austro-Hungarian Army to Austria to defend the Italian front. In the Near East, Turkey is going to be launching attacks with the help of von der Goltz into Kars, and the 2nd Army is going to attack the British in Baghdad and attempt to drive them back. Well, the Turkish attack into Kars was successful. They ended up spending the Caucasus Army. However, the attack from Mosul into Baghdad was unsuccessful. The Austrians in the Ukraine are going to launch attacks into Kiev, and they'll be supported by Austro-Hungarian heavy artillery. The Austrian attacks were successful, but they didn't have enough forces there to push the Russians out. In the production phase, Turkey is going to refit their 2nd Army in Mosul. And with 3 production, the Austrians are going to refit their armies in the Pripyat marshes and in Ukraine. Their artillery is also refit, and they're counting on Germany to assist them during its turn in the summer of 1916 in holding back the Italians in the Austrian-Italian front. It is now the summer of 1916, and Germany draws the event Bruckmüller's Steel Rain, 1916 plus. They immediately flip one fired heavy artillery to ready. If not already possessed, immediately take Tech A1. If A1 already possessed and opponent has C1, take C1. If neither condition applies, then no further effect. Well, in this case, the card will not be effective because neither of those conditions will apply. We'll move on to the German movement phase. Germany is going to move its spent 8th Army from Lithuania to Austria to help the Austro-Hungarians in the Italian front. In addition, Germany is going to move a heavy artillery from the Rhine into Austria. It'll help them because they can use that artillery defensively. During the combat phase, Germany is going to be launching an assault into the Somme. And on the Eastern Front, they're going to be attacking into Russia. In German East Africa, Ledov's spent force in Rhodesia attempts to strike at the British in Portuguese East Africa, but his guerrilla tactics are ineffective. Once again, the German attacks into the Somme are very successful, but French 4th Army holds firm and they retain possession of the Somme. The German attack in Russia is successful, but they have insufficient forces to drive the Russians back. In the war at sea, German U-boats take attrition and one is spent. In the German production phase, they have 12 production and they're going to refit their armies in Belgium. That leaves Germany with 6 production. They're going to refit their army in Austria. On the Eastern Front, they will refit their 2 armies in Minsk. Germany has 3 production left. They will spend 1 production point to produce the spent 14th Army in Prussia. Germany is now going to gift 1 point to Turkey and 1 point to Austria-Hungary. And once again, in the German technological advances phase, Germany develops another form of poison gas. They developed the G1 technology, giving them a +1 DRM to their first attack. Germany will conduct their dogfights over the Western Front. Germany has a 6. The Allied interception is a 3, thus allowing them 3 air superiority markers, and they'll leave them where they have them: Belgium, the Rhine, and in Minsk. The Western Allies draw the event Battles of the Isonzo, 1916+. If Italy is in the war, government pressure mandates an attack on Austria. See Event 104 description for details. Draw 1 more event. Western Allies draw the card Arms Race, 1916+. If you do not have C1, take it now and no further effect. So the Western Allies will gain C1 technology. The C1 technology will allow the Allies to roll 2 dice when attacking or defending. The Western Allies in Russia will gain a heavy artillery unit. The Western Allies place their artillery in the Somme, the Russians in Russia. All right, the Western Allies are not in a very great position to launch attacks, but the Battles of the Isonzo are in effect, so they have to launch 2 attacks from Venetia into Austria, but they only have 1 available army, so that's all it will be limited to, is 1 army attack. In German East Africa, Jan Christian Smuts' force in Portuguese East Africa is unsuccessful in winning the East African campaign, and Ledov Vorbeck hangs on in Rhodesia. All right, the Italians are going to make their Battles of the Isonzo attack into Austria, and they are going to employ first Western use of poison gas. And I would imagine Germany is going to use their heavy artillery in a defensive fire mode. We'll see what happens with that. The Italian attack is stymied by the German heavy artillery. The rest of the Western Front, France is going to stand pat, and they're going to refresh their armies as best as they can. At sea, one German U-boat is fresh. U-boats are successful and they inflict 1 point of damage on the British economy. Italy will spend its production point to refresh its first army. The French have 4 production points plus 1 from the British transfer. They're going to refresh 5 armies in the Somme. Britain has a total of 6 production points this turn. They're going to spend 1 to refresh their fleet in the blockade box. They'll spend 1 more to refresh their 4th army in the British Isles. They'll spend another 1 to refresh the 1st army in the Somme. And another point to refresh 2 points to refresh their army in Baghdad. Britain has 1 production point left, and they're going to use that as a gift to the Italians. During the Western Allies research, they develop planned barrages, A2. At the bottom of the card, it says if the opponent has A2, you may take A1. So the Triple Entente develops A1 technology. That gives them heavy artillery. Western Allies place 2 heavy artillery units, and Russia places 1. Russia will place theirs in Smolensk, and the Western Allies will place 1 in Verdun and another in the Somme. And finally, the Western Allies will dogfight over the Western Front for air superiority. They have a 6, Germans have a 5, so they'll be able to deploy 1 air superiority marker, and they will place that over the Somme. That will bring the Western Allies' turn to a close. The Eastern Allies draw the card Brusilov Offensive 1916 plus. Place in a Russian-occupied area. Roll 2 dice for up to 2 attacks from a chosen area. If this combat captures a previously enemy-occupied area, Romania declares war and joins the Triple Entente. Place the card in next year's deck. The Russians will place the Brusilov Offensive in Smolensk. The Russians will move their 2nd Army from Estonia into Smolensk. And the Serbian 1st Army, now that has been exiled into Albania, is going to move into Greece to support the British 2nd Army there. Russia will launch the Brusilov Offensive into Minsk. The Brusilov Offensive is very successful, but last-ditch effort by the 12th German Army prevents them from having to evacuate Minsk, and Germany holds possession of the area. Russian production is 5 points. They're going to use those to refit their armies. Russians refit armies in Estonia, Russia, Smolensk, and Kiev, and their artillery is set to ready. The Central Allies draw the event card von Strausenberg, Central Allies 1916 plus. Place on an Austro-Hungarian army. Reroll all combat dice once if the result was a loss, and rerolling could change the outcome to a win. Marker remains in play. If the dice are not rerolled, or if the reroll wins the combat by 3+ differential. The Austrians will place von Strassenberg in Ukraine. The Austrians will launch a pincer attack on Kiev from the Pripyat marshes and from the Ukraine. And once again, the Austrians are repulsed by the staunch defense of the Russian Third Army in Kiev. In the Near East, the Turkish attack from Mosul is successful into Baghdad. The attack from Jerusalem into Sinai is ineffective. The Ottomans have a total of 2 production, courtesy of a production point transfer from Germany. And they're going to use their 2 points to refit the armies in Jerusalem and Mosul. The Austrians will have a total of 4 production points this turn with the transfer from Germany. They're going to use 3 points to refresh their armies on the Eastern Front. And with 1 production point remaining, they are going to create the spent Austro-Hungarian 11th Army in Venice. In Austria. That will bring the Central Allies' turn to a close. We'll move on to the fall of 1916. All right, we're beginning the spring of 1917, and I think what I'm going to do is to prevent this from becoming an exceptionally long video. It appears that we're not going to have an automatic victory with the current board layout, so I'm going to continue to play this off camera, and I'll return to show you the results in the fall of 1918. If something interesting happens in between, I will film it. All right, it is the fall of 1918, and we've completed the game. What a great experience. The game played out very close to historical norms in many areas. We're going to go over each of the theaters, and then we're going to add up the victory points and see what the final score is. On the Western Front, the battle lines are exactly as they were in the fall of 1914. The Allies were able to retake Belgium from Germany, and then it just stagnated from there. There was a close call. Germany almost was overrun in Hanover, but they had a last-ditch roll that saved them, and quite exciting. It ended up the Red Baron came into the conflict. He was shot down over the Somme in the spring of 1918. In German East Africa, Letov Vorbeck held out till the last turn of the game, and eventually the British East African force was able to force his surrender in Rhodesia on the last turn. He was resupplied in 1916, and he hung on. I couldn't tell you how many times he was right at the end of his rope. He hung on until the last turn, and the British took the East African campaign. The Italian front played out pretty much as it did historically, except the German Austro-Hungarian forces never really entered Venetia. It was close, but they never were able to kick them out of the mountains. And we had the 97th Battle of the Isonzo, I'm sure, during this conflict. So those lines pretty much remained where they started. In the Balkans, Romania declared war in late 1917. They were pretty quickly overrun. The Greeks ended up declaring war in early 1918 or late 1917. They were actually able to knock Bulgaria out of the war, and then Austria-Hungary was able to retake Bulgaria. And it was a very active front, really. The Serbs actually performed quite well there, and it was close to driving the British out of Greece at one point. On the Eastern Front, the Russians fought well, but the Russian Revolution occurred, and we had the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. That ended Russia's play in the game. It's going to end up earning Germany 4 victory points for this, but very hard-fought battle. Germany was able to eventually transfer some of their forces from the east to the west, and they did attempt a Mikkel offensive, but just as it was historic, it did not work, and Germany was not able to really utilize any of those forces from the east to any degree. Finally, in the Near East, it was quite interesting. The MEF ended up taking Jerusalem. Allenby ended up riding into Jerusalem. He was able to take that in late 1917, I believe, or early 1918. So pretty historical. The Turks fought a good battle against the British, and they were able to retake Baghdad, driving the Indian Expeditionary Force back to Basra. And not much action on the Erzurum and Kars front. Russia, the Turks ended up launching an attack into Kars. It was successful, and then the Russians rebuilt the army and counterattacked, and then there was pretty much stagnation on that front. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add up our victory points. All right, each side is going to gain a victory point for each enemy home area and each enemy square production area controlled by his alliance. Neutral nations that joined the opposing alliance during the war qualify as enemy home nations. All right, we'll begin with Germany. They're going to start by earning 4 victory points for the provinces in Russia. They can't, even though they have more than 4, you only can get a 4 maximum for them. They're also going to gain 1 for Serbia, 1 for Romania, and I believe that's it. That is the extent of those victory points for that purpose. For the Allies, they're going to gain 1 point for East Africa. So we'll give them a point for East Africa. Yeah, incidentally, it was pretty interesting. The USA came into the war in, I believe it was spring 1918, and they never were able to deploy to the Western Front. They rebuilt their last army in the final turn. But it was quite interesting. And that's it for the victory points. So the Central Powers have a total of 6. Western Allies have a total of 1. You know, Germany needs to have 7 more than the Triple Entente in order to win. They don't have that. So, in this case, the Triple Entente has won the war. Central Powers were not able to negotiate more favorable terms than they did historically. So, in this case, the Western Powers have won the game. And what an exciting game this is, I'll tell you. If you like World War I, this game has everything that you would hope to have. You've got the naval combat potentially in the North Sea, the German High Seas Fleet attempting to break the blockade, and they made several attempts at it. They just weren't successful. The submarine campaign was extremely successful against the British over the course of the game, although it faltered greatly at the end of the game. In fact, Germany never had enough points to rebuild their spent submarines. The East African campaign was extremely exciting, and it ended up that 1 point that they earned was the only point that they actually earned in the game. So it was from the East African campaign, but it cost the Western Allies an enormous amount of resources to keep that British East African force alive. And so that's going to bring this playthrough to a close. I hope you enjoyed this. I ended up abbreviating this at the end, but I think that if I would have played this out and filmed it, we would have had a 4-hour video probably. The last half of this took quite a long time for me to complete. But tons of fun, and I would definitely be bringing this back to the channel. So thank you so much for watching, and this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club inviting you to tune back into the channel for additional videos. Thanks for watching, and have a nice evening.